Childless men are not real men. Ever since my young adulthood years, I've been told to my face, or I've heard on various platforms, numerous people of various persuasions, social settings and ages say stuff like a childless man is a worse man than a single unmarried man. These people emphatically say that childless men, married or unmarried, deserve a worse punishment than death. They must stay alive. They must live through the worst possible suffering that God can inflict on the living. Furthermore, the anti-childless men people say that the fatherhood shy men are lower than mules by social status. They are useful only as oxen are beasts of burden and must experience physical and mental pain unimaginable. That for failing to fulfill God's glorious gift and obligation to man, propagation of the species, single and married men who are fathers might be forgiven though. Lastly, the pro-propagation people argue that humanity is the summation and manifestation of God's ultimate creative potential. Through humanity, God defines her purpose. Humanity is the beginning and infinite expression of the power of God. Without humanity, the essence of God would cease, as would the entity herself. That would be the end of creation, the end of the universe. I argue, however, that humanity actualizes creation and the universe for itself. Humanity exterminated would just as well render creation and the universe more relevant to other animal species. These have or may have other terms of reference to nature beyond the comprehension of human cognitive capabilities. Therefore, God in all her multiple manifestations and interpretations across the world and across the epochs is but one of humanity's self-created survival tools. Humanity created God to assist itself in making sense of the complexities of the world and its pressures on humanity's existential challenges. When the going gets tough, humanity prays to God, fights, murders itself, its own, and destroys the world, its home. God just loves it that way. Humanity makes weapons of destruction right under God's nose. I'm convinced that the omnipresent God sits in every missile head fired in wars of the world. Wars must be God's forms of a party grooving in humanity's idiocy into self-extinction, God's own bloody demise. Name any apocalyptic war anytime, anywhere. God is there. God will have been there. We have many more wars brewing for the future. It just got worse in the Middle East. Television moving pictures showed but two missiles of multitudes colliding in mid-air over there the other day. Reporters said that one missile was launched from one land of a star and the other missile from another land of a star. The collision gave rise to meteoric explosions. God torn apart fell to the ground in a million stars, burning everything on their path, scorching the earth, people dying, crying, God have mercy on us. Everyone crying murderous vengeance in the name of God in both the lands of the stars, and the beat goes on for God. Oh yes, God must be crazy. In the Ukraine war, people are killed like hunter boys burning wild pigs on Trumpland streets. In fake border walls, Trumpland, black death bodies get riddled with bullets for their lives. They don't murder in the eyes of white supremacists, lunatics playing war games whilst people are praying in houses of God. The inadequate bold killers don't spare children either. They spray bullets on children in school classrooms, them children in there only seeking enlightenment through learning how to read, write and count. Trumpland set for extended ignoramocracy well into the future. Humanity's foolishness is boundless. Glory be to God. Amen. It is in the light of my argument above that I dismiss God's supposed works as nothing but humanity's wishful thinking outcomes when they cannot solve their problems and experience their minuteness against the forces of nature. There is no God sitting somewhere above, ever having sadistic fun cruelly punishing childless men. But the childless men condemn us are relentless, uneducated fools, and they continue. Men who are not contributing to the numerical growth of humanity defy God's divine design for man, which is to go out and make children upon children for generations to ensure endless perpetuation of God's relevance to man, if not creation in its entirety, as if God really cares. Childless men present a possible extinctification of God, notwithstanding it being as long, as short as can be. Woe betide these men. May they burn forever in hell should they die from the pain that God inflicts upon them for their horrendous transgression. Anyhow, God and His glory are forever, that for as long as men live up to their non-negotiable duty of unfailing baby seed planting in women, those men defying God's plan shall and must suffer all the indignities humanity can think of and apply upon them. Culturally, childless men are irresponsible. They are selfish. They are respectless towards their ancestors. It is the duty of every tradition-abiding man to perpetuate not only his private lineage, but above all that of his forefathers. Men who do not produce children disrupt the growth and might of their clans right up to the grand level of humanity as one big family. Ancestral spirits do not take kindly to this state of affairs. Therefore, the ancestral spirits see to it that childless men shall be isolated, ridiculed, and abused in all sorts of dehumanizing ways. When non-child producing men die, they must never be afforded the same ritualistic honors that good culturally attuned baby prolific men would be. Were it possible, many childless men would be made to vanish into thin air upon their demise. It's just as well that the latter is not the case. Otherwise, the infertile dead men would pollute the rare air that the ancestral spirits breathe, the former exacerbating their already debilitating ill-fortuned existence thereby. Childlessness is the worst abomination a man can endure by the look of things. This is when I dump culture and God in the same ancient preached latrine of humanity's extremes of diabolic, psychopathetic, anal discharges. If I don't say it, or if no third party that is familiar with me says it, no one will know whether I have children or not. In fact, almost everyone that asks me about how many children I have gets surprised when I tell them that I don't have, or neither have I ever had any children of my own that I know of. Everyone assumes that I shall have a number of children here and there. After all, as many often state, I am a fine, good-looking, strong man oozing attributes of an honorable man. That way immediately crushing the notion that childless men are not men if child production capacity is the definition of one's being a real man of honor. Others even go as far as to express their dismay at my childlessness given my apparently unfettered Valentino image. So much for my outgoing personality, discerning as I might be in more ways than one. My extroverted nature feeds the fantasies and preconceived ideas about my observed manly socializing attributes. Therefore, to many that do not know me well, I ought to be the wildest womanizer around. Clearly then, I don't need to father any child in order that my manhood qualities shall exude themselves with no fuss. In my world, The definition of a man and his good is in his deeds as an agent of positive change for the good of society at large, no matter the extent and quality of his input. Making or not making of children is not a deal-breaker contribution because, as is the nature of sexually reproductive species, and with all things remaining equal, sexually mature men will make children upon mating with equally sexually mature women. However, it is not a given that every non-protected male-female sexual encounter will result in the impregnation of the woman. It is not a given that every pregnancy will culminate in the birth of a child either. It's not a given that a successful birth will bring forth a healthy, safer and sound child. And it's not a given that the child's father will be there for them. Were children made like bread, I would have fathered 100 of them already, at least. And I would be a good father to my children by being there for them from the time I would know of their conception throughout the postnatal developmental stages to adulthood until whenever I would die. That I have not had any children of my own up to this point in my life has nothing to do with whether I'm a man or not by way of my fertility status. My potency as a man is known only by women who have carried my seed before. Otherwise, everyone else who doesn't know me that way had better shut the F up and leave me alone with my happy so-called childless way of life that causes no one any trouble. All across the world today exist millions of fatherless children. Hundreds of thousands of children are born daily without their biological fathers in their midst. So-called real men rape and impregnate women in all sorts of circumstances, from street violence, domestic violence, to wars. So-called real men in positions of econo-political privilege and power go on predatory rampages and take sexual advantage of and apathetically impregnate underprivileged, weak and vulnerable women. Philanders charm and impregnate women of all ages everywhere, every effing day. When the children are born, these lots of so-called real men, the children's fathers, are nowhere to be found. Many of the children grow up enduring much emotional and physical torment. They grow up with demeaning adjectives such as bastards applied to describe them. I cringe whenever I hear a child being described as illegitimate for their absent father. Looking at it from a layman's perspective, it is atrociously insulting to call a child illegitimate. That way, even if the expression in man-made legal terms means that the child was conceived and born outside official wedlock, a human child born as such is a human being of flesh, bones and blood, like everyone else conceived from the emergence of human sperm and egg in a woman's body. Sperm-egg fertilization occurs and develops into a zygote in the fallopian tubes. The zygote then gradually grows into a full physical human expression in the mother-to-be's womb over a 9-month period, assuming normal and eventful pregnancy. It's therefore also grossly distasteful and disrespectful to the woman to have a children labeled as illegitimate. This demeans motherhood, a state of being worthy of respect by all men alive. Writing in the Morocco World News online publication of September the 12th, 2017, journalist Amal Ben Hada posted an opinion with the title, "Fatherless Children Are Not Illegitimate." Citing her in part, she presents a case that children born out of wedlock are usually called illegitimate bastards and sons and daughters of adultery and are often treated unfairly. They are seen as a source of shame and dishonor by the traditional societies. Being a fatherless child in Morocco is nearly a lifelong condemnation. Article 446 of the Moroccan jurisprudence describes any person born outside marriage as a bastard, whether he is recognized by his biological father or not. Why should innocent children suffer the consequences of an act that they did not commit? How can a justice system deprive children from their fathers only because they were conceived outside marriage? From a religious perspective, Amal Ben Hada argues further that in the Quran, and I quote, fatherless children should be first assigned to their biological fathers if they are identified. Otherwise, society should treat them fairly as normal children with no stigmatization or segregation. Muslim societies should fulfill their obligations towards abandoned and fatherless children. As per the Quran, the first step that should be taken is to identify their biological father and to assign his name to his child. All kinds of discrimination and social segregation should be banned, as it is morally reprehensible to stigmatize fatherless children. The term illegitimate is in itself a discrimination against the defenseless human beings. The expression fatherless child is also a misnomer. This is because it linguistically cancels the presence of a male person's sperm in the child's conception process. Women's eggs don't fertilize themselves, neither in the body nor in the test tube. It's only Maria who could be impregnated by the wind, a miracle only performed by God, who doesn't know crap about sexual reproduction. And voila, Jesus was born. No living man is God, no child is fatherless. A normal man's and a normal woman's reproductive materials combine internally or externally. That subsequently produces, all things remaining equal, a physically and physiologically normal human baby that will hopefully grow up normally into normal adulthood, of, amongst other things, normal human sexual reproduction, indulgences with the opposite sex. This child will have the same cravings and needs for food, shelter, parental and social protection, as well as tender loving care and much more, just like everyone else. These are basic human rights aspects we are all entitled to, regardless of our parentage, civil status at the time of our conception and eventual birth. It's not as if children just show up from the blues unsolicited and impose themselves upon their chosen will-be parents. Now, that's what could be termed an illegitimate act of unilateral personal imposition by a stranger upon an innocent, unsuspecting, and or possibly unwilling couple. That in itself not denying the child's illegitimacy as a human being, which further explains, for example, the prevalence of rigidities of child adoption laws in many nation states. Therefore, it defies logic that some unfortunate children are still labeled as illegitimate in the 21st century, the age of superlative, ever-expanding human knowledge that ought to inspire more empathy in the world. As a rhetorical observation, it would be interesting to know how the often absent extramarital prolific so-called real men think and feel about their so-called illegitimate children out there somewhere in the world. It's no wonder then that on the other hand, there are in the world today millions of other men who consciously choose not to father any children under any circumstances, say if they can help it. Indeed, I do not have any children of my own that I know of. I truly hope that there is no child I have unknowingly fathered that is walking up and down the streets of the world bearing the abhorrent illegitimate child tag on their person. I've never been keen to want to have children when I've never been keen on marriage. I've never been keen on marriage to the extent that I've never felt emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and most decisively, durably, economically adequate for it. No wealth, no wife and kids for me. Simple. I've more than once been in near husband and wife relationships in which I was relatively an economic underdog. I was by extension considered to be intellectually deprived and culturally inferior. Disaster. I'm not interested in being with poor women either. It is what it is. The difficulties of children growing up without their fathers being present in their lives for whatever reasons struck me already from an early age whilst growing up in South Africa in the 1960s to the mid-1970s. much as did the rough times of those fathers that also longed to be with their absent children, but for variable and unique individual reasons had limited, if no access at all, to their children, wherever they were in the Southern African subcontinent. By the time I got to Zambia as a mid-teen aspirant young man in 1975, I had already long taken the personal stand that I would never want to have any children of my own if my life circumstances that being there for them would be a complicated socio-economic matter. Such continues to be the state of my life as I live it today, a happy, economically barely surviving free man of the world with much love for women and children. Nevertheless, soon I'll have my lasting millions back. I'll then marry my 10 women in one woman, my super lady. We'll make 100 children in 1 to X number of children and live happily ever after as one big together family. I find it ironic that some of my meanest critics for my current willful childless existence are real men who both knowingly or unknowingly have fathered and abashedly continue to father countless children all over the place. If they are dogs of war whose occupation is to travel the world, go out to shoot and bomb enemy people and leave them for the dead, these critics of mine here are dogs of pussy who father children everywhere and leave them for the dead. I have little regard for these kind of fools. I have this vile thought in my head that some of these abandoned children could someday find these negligent fathers of theirs. The children should then castrate the men in revenge for themselves and vengeance for their estranged mothers. Poetic justice served. Society has more to gain from taking care of underprivileged children of the world in need of love, care and protection here and now. Speaking for myself, I know that I have in my time directly played a much appreciated father figure role for many a child, so-called fatherless or not, across the world. I even had a need to have a pigsty for a playing field full of piglets for children to know how to be a decent human being who understands fully the importance of adults being there for children, particularly so their own blood children once they, the adults, have become parents themselves. Childless as I may be, I can with confidence, pride and dignity state that I'm a good father figure and male role model for children and youth. Prove me wrong if you can. Simple. Go and raise your own children and let me be. I have books to write. I have money to kill. There is a future mother of my children awaiting me in the horizon yonder, and that's my case alone to deal with. In the meantime, I absolutely do not wish to be a conscious contributor to the ever-growing and infuriating statistics of the so-called fatherless or illegitimate children of the world. The living conditions of the majority of these children represent an aspect of being human that I find debasing for humanity, for my humanity as a man. I care profoundly about the well-being of children the world over. Therefore, when some ignoramus knowing no shit about me comes out to criticize, judge and ridicule me for having no children of my own, I not only get upset, I hurt deep inside. The hurt is out of the apparent trivialization of the values that I hold as the upright man I strive to be always. My values shape the stance that I take in relation to critical personal choices that I make in my never-ending aspirations and efforts to be a decent human being in a world immersed in hate and human self-annihilatory tendencies. In all this, I'm ever conscious of the confines of the generally accepted life-supporting norms and laws of the land. Wherever I find myself, a Google search of fatherless children produces tons of academic research, hobby or professional societal conditions, commentaries, special socio-political interest organizations, findings and reports, and much more information and ideas material on the harsh realities of children growing up without their fathers present in their lives. I shall list a few select links below at the end of the presentation. As a global phenomenon, regardless of race, color, religion, creed, political orientation, or sexual orientation, the significance of a father in a child's life is generally recognized by all. This is a general starting and a guiding principle before the vast constellation of complications of human relations culminating in the existence of fatherless children. Argument, presentational style bias according to sources, background granted. The general consensus, for example, is that, and I quote a South African online newspaper, Daily Maverick of June 14, 2023, children are at much greater risk of being victims of violence if they grow up in father-absent families. Girls in particular are more likely to get involved in abusive or exploitative relationships, and boys could go on to become perpetrators of violence, including gender-based violence themselves. Growing up with a positively involved father, however, reduces the risks and helps to nurture long-term violence prevention strategies. While substance abuse has many complex causes, teenagers with absent fathers have been shown to be a high-risk group, boys in particular. Children are also likely to follow in their father's footsteps if he battles with substance abuse. With a supportive father present, these issues dissipate, and children are generally less prone to substance abuse and the related issues of addiction, depression, and suicide. Absent fathers can exacerbate depression, anxiety, and mental health disorders in children and worsen their academic performance. When fathers are involved in a positive way, on the other hand, the children's mental health improves. They have greater faith in their own value, tend to do well at school, and are able to form secure attachments as they grow. The Daily Maverick article quoted above says further that according to Human Sciences Research Council, most children in South Africa, over 60%, don't live with their biological fathers, and 20% only have contact with their biological father twice a week. Another South African online newspaper, IOL, reported on October 5th, 2019 that the General Household Survey 2018 by Stats SA revealed that 43.1% of children lived only with their mothers, while a much smaller percentage, 3.3% of children lived only with their fathers in 2018. Furthermore, research conducted by the Human Sciences Research Council and the South African Race Relations over a period of 5 years showed that 60% of South African children have absent fathers. More than 40% of South African mothers are single parents. In the UK, Fathers for Justice states that, and I quote, nearly 4 million children are fatherless in the UK. Whereas in the USA, Fatherhood.org reports that, according to the US Census Bureau, 18.4 million children, that is 1 in 4, live without a biological step or adopted father in the home. That's enough children to fill New York City twice or Los Angeles 4 times over. Research shows that a father's absence affects children in numerous unfortunate ways, while a father's presence makes a positive difference in the lives of both children and mothers. And fathers.com presents data that shows that children from fatherless homes are more likely to be poor, become involved in drug and alcohol abuse, drop out of school, and suffer from health and emotional problems. Boys are more likely to become involved in crime, and girls are more likely to become pregnant as teens. With relevant references detailed in the article immediately above, the organization lists 6 of the many ills associated with fatherlessness as follows: poverty. Children in father-absent homes are almost 4 times more likely to be poor. In 2011, 12% of children in married couple families were living in poverty, compared to 44% of children in mother-only families. Children living in female-headed families with no spouse present had a poverty rate of 47.6%, over 4 times the rate in married couple families. Fatherless children are at a dramatically greater risk of drug and alcohol abuse. There is significantly more drug use among children who do not live with their mother and father. Physical and emotional health. A study of 1,977 children aged 3 and older living with a residential father or father figure found that children living with married biological parents had significantly fewer externalizing and internalizing behavioral problems than children living with at least one non-biological parent. Children of single-parent homes are more than twice as likely to commit suicide. Educational achievement. Children in grades 7 and 12 who have lived with at least one biological parent, youth that experience divorce, separation, or non-union birth reported lower grade point averages than those who have always lived with both biological parents. Children living with their married biological father tested at a significantly higher level than those living with a non-biological father. Father involvement in school is associated with the higher likelihood of a student getting mostly A's. This was true for fathers in biological parent families, for stepfathers, and for fathers heading single-parent families. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. Fatherless children have more trouble academically, scoring poorly on tests of reading, mathematics, and thinking skills. Children from father-absent homes are more likely to be truant from school, more likely to be excluded from school, more likely to leave school at age 16, and less likely to attain academic and professional qualifications in adulthood. Crime. Adolescents living in intact families are less likely to engage in delinquency than their peers living in non-intact families. Compared to peers in intact families, adolescents in single-parent families and step-families were more likely to engage in delinquency. This relationship appeared to be operating through differences in family processes, parental involvement, supervision, monitoring, and parent-child closeness between intact and non-intact families. A study using data from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health explored the relationship between family structure and risk of violent acts in neighborhoods. The results revealed that if the number of fathers is low in the neighborhood, then there is an increase in acts of teenage violence. The statistical data showed that 1% increase in the proportion of single-parent families in a neighborhood is associated with a 3% increase in an adolescent's level of violence. In other words, adolescents who live in neighborhoods with lower proportions of single-parent families and who report higher levels of family integration commit less violence. Children aged 10 to 17 living with 2 biological or adoptive parents were significantly less likely to experience sexual assault, child maltreatment, other types of major violence, and non-victimization type of adversity, and were less likely to witness violence in their families compared to peers living in single-parent families and step-families. A juvenile study of 109 juvenile offenders indicated that family structure significantly predicts delinquency, sexual activity, and teen pregnancy. A study using a sample of 1,409 rural southern adolescents, 851 females and 558 males, aged 11 to 18 years, investigated the correlation between father absence and self-reported sexual activity. The results revealed that adolescents in father absence homes were more likely to report being sexually active compared to adolescents living with their fathers. Being raised by a single mother raises the risk of teen pregnancy. Marrying with less than a high school degree and forming a marriage where both partners have less than a high school degree. This has not been a presentation to promote a cause. Neither has it not been my intention to moralize with this presentation, nor have I intentionally sought to hang out or judge anybody. I have striven to be as objective as humanly possible in my writing this presentation, especially so given the enduring emotional abuse I'm ever subjected to as a childless man by choice. If I have anything I wish to address myself to, it is the pathetic ignorance, nauseating double standards, and pitiful awe towards me of my critics. Many of these shameless psychosomatic critics of mine neatly fall under the dogs of pussy category I've mentioned earlier on in the presentation. The idea is to inform and teach, hoping that the reader and or listener shall know me better and thus be in a more enlightened state in their subsequent choice to either nail me on the cross or celebrate me for my being who I am, living my life as I do. I'm a free spirit with no fear for the unknown contra my personal integrity. I have nothing to hide. That said, other than the personally fulfilling irrepressible urge to educate, I'm under no obligation to explain, defend, and justify myself to any fool for my private lifestyle choices. However, I'll happily respond to well-intended queries about how and why I live my life in the way that I do, given where in the world I live at any time. Meanwhile, the so-called friends and relatives wishing to counsel me for my unconventional way of life as relates to having wife and kids may do so now. Good riddance. That's all they can do for their own good. They cannot oppress me in any way. I am not afraid of them at any level. I know that there are many more voluntary or involuntary childless men and women everywhere. Some are afraid and voiceless because of the extremely oppressive socio-cultural conditions under which they live in their respective parts of the world. Beyond my desire to inform and teach, I hereby speak some more for the tormented, the afraid, and the voiceless. This is simply because I can. And lastly but not least, I wish with profound humility and admiration to acknowledge the millions of single-parent mothers of the world throughout the ages. Against the meanest odds, many of these suffering single-parent mothers manage to birth and raise children that eventually grow up to be high bar across the board decent human beings that I enjoy and gift to the world. One of these single-parent mothers gave birth to and raised a nothing compares to you type fine gentleman who has remained my best friend and brother from another mother since we first met at school in January 1977. He was then a 12-year-old boy to man with more brains and refined social skills higher than those of many 20-year-old young men I know to this day. I was 17 years old myself, living in separate continents today, engaged each in our unique vocational occupations and living our separate lives as grown-up men. Walking into the future together with Anele is a never-ending blessing. Thanks to our beloved Mimi, the most inspiringly resilient single-parent mother I know. Through Anele, I salute all the survivor, achiever, change-maker, ruler children of single-parent mothers of the world. One of these remarkable children, Barack Obama, broke all the barriers and prejudices of all kinds to become president of the United States of America. Despite its flaws, America remains the most powerful nation on earth today. Barack Obama effectively becoming the most powerful man in the world for 8 years is a humongous feat that has inspired a whole generation of children and youth throughout the world. Hope, faith, love, tenacity, and the future live in those that have the capacity and will to overcome difficult life outcomes due to the absence of their biological fathers, if not any other supportive male figure in their lives. The slogan, "Yes, we can," rings in my head. The so-called fatherless, illegitimate children are as legitimately children of the future as any other child. The future belongs to us all in the present. The past may have dealt us unfair hands in the form of unworthy fathers, but we all deserve a fair chance at enjoying and shaping what the future promises us all. Real men walk into the future along with theirs and all children of the world. Of course, there are millions of estranged men across the world who, for various reasons, the analysis of which is beyond the scope of this presentation here, are directly denied the opportunities to be there for, if not with their children. I feel for these men, many of whom do genuinely yearn to be with their children, but are ever hindered by circumstances they do not have control over. Even then, as I've already stated above, I have little empathy for libido drunk philanderers and dogs of pussy who care but little of whether or not they leave behind children in their sex escapades all over the world. As for me, I continue with awaiting the future mother of my children to find me if she can, if she wants to. The quality of my manliness transcends the need to go around making non-attached babies with anything that's childbearing. I live for extraordinary things. I'm inspired by extraordinary things that the arts and science do for human progress throughout the epochs, for the good and bad. Human life in all its physical and esoteric aspects is as extraordinary as can be. To the extent that the extraordinary is defined from human experience terms, the extraordinary begins and ends with human life. Procreation of life is not an extraordinary phenomenon or achievement. Human life will happen anyway, extraordinarily enough. In mortal human terms, the quintessential extraordinary about human life and the state of being a progressively functional human being is in the capacity and willingness to not only create life but in the nurturing of it. Therefore, you are a fucking real man. You make children, you raise them. Simple. I rest my case. Death to Single Men is the video I posted earlier on. Watch it in order to see more how my choice to not have children connects with my views on marriage. Before you go, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and that you found it of value as you go about your own journey of life with all its joys, trials and tribulations. In that case, please like the video, and if you've not done so yet, do subscribe to the channel here. Help me grow the channel to be a more dynamic and prolific platform for sharing ideas and thoughts of inspiration as we all go about seeking answers to pertinent questions of living as thinkers and creatives wishing to see this world of ours a better place for all. Your support is valuable for the channel. Feel free to write below. Ask questions, make comments, and give suggestions as to what topics to cover in the future. I'll also appreciate feedback on how we can improve the quality of presentations on the channel. See you in the next one soon. Peace.
Thank you.